the truck came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you just hear the sound of people getting hit.
The sound was crazy.
The sound was scarring, and so was the image of it.
Mom, get over here. Are you okay? What happened?
I'm a nurse, and my mother-in-law was saying, can you go and help people? Can you go and help people? So I went out there. The first gentleman we saw on the ground had people by him. He was alert and oriented, awake. So we moved on from him across the road, and that's when we came across the little boy that was in the road.
Paramedics! Paramedics! That was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. That was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Somebody literally drove by right in front of us, hit a whole crowd of kids.
Just people?
Yeah, there was kids involved though.
Okay.
My mom was trying to help one of them. One of the kids was turning purple and there's blood everywhere.
Don't be out of it.
I'm not.
He's fine.
Oh my God.
It's chaos in the streets. Julie, she's fine. Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We were told not to let anyone in. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, we were told not to let anyone
Sorry,
in.
I just kind of like diaper bag. That was right.
No, you're good.
No, you're all right, man.
Are you sure that guy was in here?
Yes. Jaden, yes, he was.
Church. I packed them all in that church, the tallest building. I grabbed them and pulled everybody over, and I packed them all in the church. They're all in.
Guys, I'm not kidding you. A car came driving down the street during the parade. Hey.
Angie, are you okay? I think we're just...
Jesus Christ, dude, this is so. What about Grandma? Mom!
Through people.
Just come here. Just come here. Just come on. It's okay.
Who's yelling?
Somebody's yelling something. Just wait. Just wait, Mom. Go inside.
You get inside too.
I'm fine. Car came driving right down the street, hit multiple kids. One kid was turning purple. My mom was helping him or her. I don't know if it was a guy or girl, but there's blood everywhere. Apparently shots are fired, but I'm not 100% sure on that. That's what the police said.
On November the 21st, 2021, a man named Darrell E. Brooks, driving a Ford SUV, drove into an annual Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It's a truly terrible attack that has got people asking, why was a man like Darrell even on the street in the first place? More on that soon. It's been said this has no link to any terror organisation and therefore is not being treated like an act of terror, but the level of aggression seen in the attack is somewhat comparable to someone with a political motive, with some reports saying he was swerving side to side in order to hit more people. What kind of a monster could do this? An event geared towards families and children. Today we will go through what we know and try to better understand this whole situation.
To the deadly Christmas parade horror in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Well, where to even start with this? Brooks has a huge rap sheet and a long and sordid history with the law. It's unclear on his background and upbringing, but what is known is Brooks has a criminal record dating back to the 90s and had 2 outstanding cases against him at the time of the parade attack, which is why people have wondered, what was this man even doing out? But it does get worse. He's facing charges of resisting or obstructing an officer, jumping bail, reckless endangering safety, disorderly conduct and battery for an incident on November the 2nd. Brooks is also facing felony charges that include recklessly endangering safety and possession of a firearm that were filed in July 2020. He posted a cash bond in connection with the charges, including recklessly endangering safety with domestic abuse assessments, disorderly conduct with domestic abuse assessments, and battery. Brooks has pleaded guilty or no contest to bail jumping, obstructing an officer, and operating a vehicle whilst on a suspended licence over the years. In 2010, he was found guilty of felony strangulation and suffocation following a no contest plea. Brooks was sentenced to 3 years of probation with a court order to receive counselling and to take prescribed medication and cease contact with the victim. The Milwaukee County District Attorney said that Brooks should not have been released on such an inappropriately low cash bond given his past charges. In the most recent case, dating from an incident on November the 2nd, a woman who Brooks has a child with told the police he deliberately tried to run her over with his car after an altercation. This is the same car used in the massacre. Nevada's state sex offender registry also shows an entry for Brooks alongside a 2006 conviction for statutory sexual seduction, which state law defines as sex between an adult at least 18 years of age and a person under the age of 16. It's alleged he fathered a child with a 15-year-old girl and failed to register as a sex offender. I'm sorry to throw all that out at you, but I think it really illustrates just what kind of person we're dealing with here. This is someone that has no issues breaking the law in reprehensible ways, and with such an extensive history, it's safe to postulate he doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon, and it would have just escalated. The US Sentencing Commission released the results of a major study of all 25,000 federal offenders released in 2005. For the most part, it reaffirms the conventional wisdom of criminologists. Older offenders and those with more education are less likely to return to a life of crime. But the single best indicator of whether an ex-offender will become a reoffender is the length and seriousness of his rap sheet. With that in mind, Brooks was making no efforts to educate himself or move away from his life of crime, so it's understandable why some are wondering what he was ever doing out on the streets in the first place. Among other things, Brooks appears to be an amateur rapper who appeared under the name MathBoyFly on YouTube, a since deleted YouTube channel. It features several music videos, and in one, a red SUV could be seen in the background. This SUV is identical to the one used in the parade attack. The parade disaster took place 2 days after 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted for all charges, stemming from the killing of 2 men and wounding a 3rd man during the unrest that erupted after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, about 55 miles from the incident. It's unclear if the two are linked, with most sources stating there is no connection, but there is some reason for concern, as Dr. Todd Grande explains.
In response to the Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty verdict, Brooks indicated that he was not surprised. Brooks also appeared not to be a fan of white people, advocating violence against this group, and he mentioned he had an affinity for Adolf Hitler. Now moving to my analysis. There are several questions that are brought up by this case. I will go through each one of them here. Why was a career criminal like Darrell Brooks out on bail in the first place? Some areas like Wisconsin have tried to eliminate or reduce cash bail. The idea is that when someone is arrested, they are presumed innocent. If they are kept in jail before their trial, they will lose their job, it will damage their relationships, and they may plead guilty just to get out of jail. This is something that happens quite often. In addition, the cash bail system tends to discriminate against minorities. I don't necessarily think that reducing bail is a bad idea, but I think that this plan has been executed without proper research. It's almost like lawmakers and the courts are just guessing. They're playing around with all the dials and levers on this big switchboard without knowing the effect of the changes that they're making. It's almost like the Swedish chef from the Muppets, just kind of moving around but not really cooking anything. They somehow believe that just randomly making changes is the solution to the problem, but it rarely is. I'm not really sure this whole initiative applies to Brooks in the first place, considering he was repeatedly charged with violent felonies. His bail should have been set much higher because he was a danger to the community. It's not clear if Darrell Brooks ever met a police officer who he did not resist and obstruct. Next question. If Darrell Brooks was the parade killer, what was his motive? The authorities have been very careful to avoid attributing the motive to the Rittenhouse verdict. Some in the media have gone even further, declaring that there was no evidence that the Rittenhouse verdict was a motive for this crime. I find this interesting because the parade murders occurred just 2 days after the Rittenhouse verdict, and Waukesha, Wisconsin is 55 miles from Kenosha, so they're relatively close. Who knows what the motive was, but certainly there is some evidence supporting it was tied to the Rittenhouse verdict. I think the lesson learned on this point would be that trying to make the Rittenhouse trial about racism, when it was really about the limits of self-defense, has the potential to encourage some people to be violent, especially those without critical thinking skills. There will always be certain people who don't understand the idea of dialogue and debate. They take things too far. They get really excited about an issue and want to act on it without actually doing their own research and understanding the issue. I also find it interesting that there is such reluctance to assign motives in the parade murders when the alleged perpetrator has made pretty clear racist statements. Some have argued that there is a double standard at work as far as the media coverage and speculation. It's almost like the media is not concerned with honesty. Rather, they're just pushing whatever narrative they feel aligns with their political beliefs. This is also part of the problem, which leads to distorted interpretations of various events.
Either way, what we do know is just before the attack, the accused mass murderer had just been involved in a domestic dispute and he was fleeing from the scene of that crime moments before he drove into the parade. He was not actively being chased by the police, however. Some sources had speculated he was, and this was the reason for him taking a wrong turn and failing to stop. We know this wasn't the case and there is a different motive at play, but that is, as of writing, still unclear. One thing is for sure, it should have been hard to miss if he didn't want to drive down there, as he drove through barriers and past officers who were telling him to stop, even getting shot at as he broke down the barriers at a reported 40 miles an hour. The footage is bone chilling. The event was even live streamed, so a lot of this was caught on camera. The unhinged Brooks is seen driving this huge Ford SUV through the crowd as people scream and look on in terror. Authorities say around 4:40 PM local time on a Sunday, a red SUV stormed past several barricades and barreled into a crowd attending the Milwaukee's suburbs' 58th annual Christmas parade. Police reported that Brooks deliberately targeted the crowd, driving in a zigzag pattern to hit as many people as possible. The car continued directly into the parade, running over people as attendees frantically tried to scatter away. Police said a Waukesha officer with 6 years on the force fired at the SUV in an attempt to stop it, though no one appeared to have been hit by the bullets. Brooks managed to escape the scene of the crime somehow and abandoned his vehicle, which was later found by police the same day. But he didn't get too far because, as you can imagine, things were on red alert. I think a good way to illustrate that would be in the choice of the police department to issue a shelter-in-place order for parts of Waukesha. The American Red Cross says the warning is issued when chemical, biological, or radiological contaminants may be released accidentally or intentionally into the environment, and residents should select a small interior room with no or few windows, taking refuge there. The shelter-in-place order is the act of seeking safety within the building you occupy rather than evacuating the area or seeking a community emergency shelter. Some recent SIP orders include the coronavirus pandemic in March, and one was issued after an explosion at a chemical plant in West Virginia in December of 2020. It speaks to the level of seriousness of this maniacal attack, although the order was lifted that evening. Brooks was caught on a doorbell camera approaching somebody's house to ask them to call an Uber for him. At this time, news about the attack and perpetrator would have been limited, so thinking it was just someone trying to catch a cab, the occupant of the house obliged and helped Brooks call a taxi.
Hey, I called an Uber, and I'm supposed to be waiting for it over here, but I don't know when it's coming. Can you call it for me, please? I'm homeless. I don't know. It's going to be him. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's My ID.
The taxi never showed up, however, because just moments later, this happened.
Hands up! Put your hands where I can see them!
Whoa!
Hands up! Hands up! Hands up!
I just...
26th, 500 block of Elizabeth, 26th.
Did he know this guy? Absolutely not. Okay.
During the immediate aftermath and confusion, 5 people were confirmed killed and a further 48 others were injured. The lost souls were identified as 4 women and 1 man, and hospitals admitted 28 people and 9 were in critical condition. By November the 23rd, the number of reported injuries had increased to 62 and the number of fatalities had increased to 6, after an 8-year-old child died at a hospital.
8-year-old Jackson Sparks killed by that SUV barreling through the crowd. His older brother Tucker still in the hospital. His family saying, by the grace of God, he is recovering from his injuries. The victims ranging from 8 to 81. 3 of them members of the Dancing Grannies, there to delight the families who came out to watch the parade.
We lost so many of our members. Right now it's very raw. It's very, very difficult.
Lee Owen had 3 grandchildren of her own, her son Chris telling us people who knew her loved her. Jane Cullick, described by her niece as an angel on earth. They were the type of family that went to church on Sundays and had family game night on weekends. Willem Hospel, Ginny Sorensen, and Tamara Durand, whose husband Dave said her memory will bring joy to all who knew her.
Prosecutors said a total of 13 children remain hospitalised and the ages of the dead ranged from 8 to 81. 3 of the lost were members of the Milwaukee Dancing Grannies, a dance group composed solely of grandmothers who were an inspiration and joy to everyone who knew them. It's a truly upsetting and unthinkable loss, the elderly and children. I think having to live with knowledge you did that would be a fate worse than jail for most, but then again, it's hard to imagine someone who is capable of perpetrating such a thing on purpose would feel anything at all.
Kulik, whose wife Jane was killed at the parade, is furious about that.
I wanted the world to know what was taken. She was a beautiful person.
She was a mother and a grandmother. And as he looked through their wedding photos, he told us about how good she was to her family.
We were a team. That was my partner. I needed her. I've always needed her.
Brooks was arrested the night of the attack, soon after telling a resident that he was homeless and waiting for an Uber. Brooks has been charged with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, but following the 6th victim, more charges are likely to follow. Brooks's bond was set at $5 million this time, and he will not be getting out anytime soon. Possibly with reality sinking in, knowing he won't ever walk free again, Brooks wept in the courtroom.
Defendant presents to our community not only flight risk, but the dangerousness that he presents, his history of violence, and the allegations in this complaint where it is stated plainly that on several occasions he was told to stop by police officers. They risked their own safety to try and step in front of the car to stop him.
Brooks was charged with 5 deaths, but the additional death of an 8-year-old child was announced in court.
Mr. Brooks is facing 5 consecutive life sentences if he's convicted on all counts in this complaint. I wish to notify the court sadly that today we learned of another death of a child related to this case.
It's hard to imagine anyone waking up that morning and expecting to lose a loved one in such a dreadful way. A festival that was supposed to bring joy and cheer to everyone. After a rough couple of years, people needed it. Brooks will have to answer for his crimes. He will be held accountable, thankfully. I wonder if his actions will haunt him. I mean, how can a person live with such guilt? Anyone with any form of soul left would surely be consumed by it. I truly hope, above everything else, that the families and community can move past this horrific attack. It's always nice to see people are able to put everything aside and help each other in times of tragedy. After all, community is based off common unity. It's hard to quantify the impact something like this has. Something so shocking and objectively terrible has to make you think. It's a really sad outcome, but I do hope some good can come of this to better ensure a future where this kind of thing doesn't happen. My heart goes out to anyone who is struggling with this or just anything in general. The world can be a cold and cruel place, but it's the same place that made you, so it's not all that bad. Thank you for watching.